Hello, Committee Chair Atterbury and members of the Maryland General Assembly's work group to address police reform and accountability in Maryland. I am a 30-year-old educator and arts program manager living in Hamden, a neighborhood in Maryland's 40th legislative district. I am asking you to push for legislation that will return control of Baltimore City's police department back to Baltimore City government, repeal the Law Enforcement Officer Bill of Rights, and allow investigations into all police misconduct to be disclosed under the Maryland Public Information Act. Under the current arrangement, Baltimore must rely on the Maryland General Assembly to pass legislation that would affect many of the rules that dictate Baltimore's police department. Despite funding the police department and appointing the commissioner, Baltimore has had an unprecedented lack of control over its police policies than any other city of our size in the country. As a result, the city has to rely on a group of people, the majority of whom don't live in Baltimore, that only meet 1/4 of the year from from January to April, really like February to April, to make decisions on our police policies. It is not at all equitable to expect folks in Baltimore City to get to Annapolis to testify or be a part of those hearings. Given this, it is not surprising that Baltimore's police force suffers an unprecedented amount of corruption, as shown by the actions of the Gun Trace Task Force and the millions of dollars of lawsuits paid out annually to victims of police brutality and Baltimore's consent decree. For all this corruption, the police have had historically higher murder rates and complementarily historically low 32% homicide clearance rates in 2019. While local control may not solve all the BPD's issues, the amount of money we spend on police in the city is irresponsible, immoral, and a huge waste of funds given the failed outcomes. This policy would make the police force more accountable to the people of Baltimore to decide how to keep their communities safe and use that money. Additionally, the Law Enforcement Officer's Bill of Rights also thwarts accountability and transparency. It protects police officers and makes it clearly impossible to discipline or remove a police officer when they have committed a crime, or understand patterns of wrongdoing with individual officers and police departments as a whole. How can we know an investigation is thorough and independent when it's completed inside a system looking to protect its budget and reputation? What role does the Civilian Review Board actually have if none of its recommendations have any real authority to be followed due to protections under the board? We need a stronger system of checks and balances. The police should not be above the law. We are not alone in this. Look to Camden, New Jersey's police department reforms, and the Delaware NAACP is calling for the repeal of LIBOR as well in Delaware because it conflicts with the spirit of the state's Freedom of Information Act, the FOIA, similar to our MPIA. I live in a predominantly white neighborhood with a large school that has predominantly black students. As an educator, those students have confessed feeling truly afraid to walk through the neighborhood on the way to the bus home from school because of what may happen if a neighbor sees them, believes they are doing something suspicious, and calls the cops. I know students just last year who have had traumatic interactions with the police who were called for completely unnecessary reasons and then treated the child terribly. That officer should be investigated for past misconduct to build a case, and who won't be, so that child lives in fear of having to face that officer again every day. It is for this reason that I ask your work group to recommend and push legislation that returns control of Baltimore City's police department and Baltimore City's government, and pass legislation that would allow for the more public accountability and transparency to stop police departments across the state, and especially in Baltimore, from only being able to be investigated by sworn officers when harm is committed, and covering up past misconduct complaints for the process of an investigation. Thank you for your time and attention on these important issues.